Life is hard.
Life is hard.
So, okay, so I was not aware of that, so I will explain you some experience I have during my career. And I think that first, in France, we have many, many administrative layers that oblige us to fight when we are in the academy to be able to do something. I don't know if you agree with that. Please, okay. So it's the bad side of our system. And to tell you once, I had visitors from Singapore. They came in the lab and they said, okay, I thought they were interested by what we do in science. We try to do science. And they said, no, can you explain me how you do with all these administrations? I opened eyes like that. And he said, because we have more and more and we would like to do. So this is the first point. When we try to have contacts with companies, and we have many. In my lab, at the beginning, it was a lab mainly working with companies with few high-level research, not many people working on high-level research. And at this period, we had contracts from the lab with one administration and the companies. And the companies, for example, paid for a master, for the tuition fees, and give something more for the group, for the lab. Each time we asked for the student or for the PhD and for the lab. So we always have a couple of contracts. Maybe sometimes if it is a startup, it's very small because we want to help the startup, not to, but it exists because it's a kind of principle. You have to pay for light, for computers, for everything for the research too. So it's a fair thing. Then we were asked to, from the academic partners in France, CNRS, and so on, to do more higher level research and to focus on that. So we had to change because we got too much money from companies, and they said you have too much money from companies, you have to go to research, academic research. Okay, so it took many years. We switched to academic research, more international papers, publication, and so on. And so it changed a little bit because during a period, I am very interested in transfer with companies. I think it's very interesting, but it's not always easy to do, but very interesting. So when I had the opportunity to be at the head of the lab, I always kept a part of the activity devoted to companies. And during 3 years only, 4 years, we succeeded to pay one engineer full-time, computer scientist, computer engineer, to work with several companies. So his work was to develop software for companies on several projects. But I didn't succeed to keep one people like that after, because it's difficult to do high-level academic research and also to work deeply with companies because the objectives are not the same, as said Professor Nagel. So we were asked to do more academic, so we didn't have permanent people to work with companies. So now, my experience, maybe we have several things. We always, till now, have some contracts with companies. They pay, for example, salary of a PhD. We have a system in France that the company can pay half the salary of the PhD and the Ministry for Research pays the other half. This is very interesting for companies because for them they can also get money from I don't know where. So it's very low cost for the company. It's very interesting for the lab. And these people, PhD students, they stay half or 80% of their time in the lab and 20 in the company. Sometimes people put them in the company 80%, but it's not good because they have to do academic things, and the aim is that they will be able to be the head of project for research and development after. So they need that. And with this contrast, this CIFRE, the name is CIFRE in France, this PhD is paid, there is always a contract in parallel for the group to develop, for going to congress, to workshops, to move in the world, to do work. So this is things, and in France, this works very well, and they don't have enough. There are too many possibilities, and the academic people and universities with companies don't ask enough. They said, yes, we can provide you this system, and it is a very good one. But it is difficult with the startup. From the lab, from my group, and from the lab, we had 3 spin-offs. The first one with a guy on neuroimaging, and he created his company. I discussed with him and with one administration of the lab. During 1 year, I wanted to have some money back from this startup when they will have money, and few, just for the principle, because I thought that it was important that we worked a lot with this PhD guy, we did many things, so it was normal for me that we could get something, little, but something for the lab. And the administration at this period was not with me, was with the guy of the company. And it was an opportunity I had to sign. And I said, no, I don't agree, I don't sign, because I disagree with that. So we discussed 1 year. At the end of the year, the guy who created the startup was obliged to get money with the sponsors and so on. So he said, okay, I sign. So if he had signed, it was okay. And the contract said that when the startup will be okay, we get enough money to live, they will provide us during 5 years a small amount each year. Okay. It was a very small amount, fixed amount, not a percentage. And we did that. This company, the name was Teralis, was very nice, improved, and provides services for image processing to pharmaceutical companies. For example, if you have if you test a product, you need animals, for example. So the pharmaceutical department, they test the product on many animals, and they have many images, and they don't know how to do that. So they send the images to this company. The company process the images and provide them results on the performance of the product and so on. They don't sell software, they just sell services. So it was okay. So this company grew, and they hired 6 PhD from the lab in this company, and also 2 other students at the master's or something that were in the lab. Okay. After a while, this company, after about 8 years, was divided into 2 companies. It always goes on, but a part of this company, with the guy who created the first one, left 2 or 3 years ago. He was licensed by the large company who bought them, and now, since 2 years, he creates another one, which is a concurrent of the first one in Lyon. So he came to the lab and said, I create another one, can you help me? Okay. And so with this guy, he creates another product, and we help him also. So this was the first example. I had another example of, I wanted, when I was a researcher, I was very interested by this transfer. I wanted to create a kind of transfer structure between our lab and the companies in between, because it's difficult to fill this gap. And I didn't succeed. I get a lot of money from the town, from people, politics, and so on. But the University of Lyon stopped me because they had a system for this valorization and transfer. And they said, you will be our concurrent. It was wrong. I said, your system is a bunch. They just take money from the lab, from the companies, but it's not interesting for you. You do no transfer. We have many things in our labs that could be exploited, but it stays there. So I couldn't do that. So I had a woman who was the head of development and research in a company. She came with me. I paid her to do this job, and we couldn't go further. So I kept her and paid her, and she created a startup where she did it was a startup to help labs and academic structure to create a project for creating startups. Okay, so she stayed in the lab during 15 years. I gave her an office, but we couldn't create this structure. And the third one, but she is still, she has his startup, she goes now, and she's alone. She never grew, but she succeeded to live with that. And the third example, it was a girl, she was an engineer in the lab, research engineer, specialist of magnetic resonance imaging. And she was fond of animals. And one day, because I made the fusion with another lab, with her lab, when we fused, okay, I didn't know this person, and one day she came and she said, I'm currently trying to create a startup on that. Okay, I said, yeah, I looked at the project, I said, yes, it's very good. Do you help me? I said, yes, the lab can help you. So I helped her to create that, and the startup was imaging of domestic animals with MRI. When you have a domestic animal sick with a tumor or something. So there was nothing in France like that. In Canada, I knew several small companies doing that, but in France, there were no startup providing this kind of service. So she created that with the veterinary school in Lyon, and she is located there, and it's okay. She goes in Nice, in the south of France, where you have many people with small dogs and much money, and they put the dogs there and so on. So this is the third example for this startup project. And okay, and the other ways we work with the companies, the last example I can give you with the lab, it's a research group in the lab which devoted to therapy planning for cancer. And this group works with a French company, and they provide PhD students each year with contracts. And they work like that since 8 to 10 years. And now some of these students were hired by the company, but it's always the same scheme. They pay for PhD with a contract, and it's always like that. Okay, so I can answer.
Thank you very much. Some question or comments?
So can you elaborate a little bit more on the second startup you mentioned, the one that it's the startup for creating startups? So she has been 15 years in the lab. Like, can you tell us a little bit more about the results of her work? Like, what has she achieved, or what type of services is she providing? Like, can you tell us more?
Yeah. We, in our academic formation, and when we work with, when we form PhD people, we teach them and we help them to have high scientific level. But they don't know, we don't know management, all that legacies. And so she helped us and the other groups for all this aspect, legacy, juridics, how and which, where to ask money, how to ask money to have this, helped to create a startup or something. It was that aspect that is missing for us.
Okay.
She was this complement.
Okay. So she has been used a lot for requesting money, like for like grant seeking and things like that, or it's completely entrepreneurial and it's in industry and helping students or other labs create their own companies. Or?
Yes, it is that aspect.
Okay.
Yes, that aspect. How to, when you have when you need to create your startup, you have many things to do. You first have to do that and have a book or legal aspect and so on. So she could help with that and explain to students how, if they would like to create something, she gave us some points and then some focus on major points.
Good, thank you.
Thank you very much. For this unstructured session, I will ask Steven and after Carolina to share with us this kind of idea. If you can play to provocate the audience to be with other arguments, why not? Feel free of every tools to discuss.
Okay, so I think what I could say. So different places have different constraints as to what they can and can't do. I can give you some examples from right now. For example, I have a project that's in my lab that has published a couple of papers so far, which is a medical augmented reality project. The folks involved in it are informally in the startup right now, but although they've won a couple of startup contests, they actually haven't been able to get the funding from the contest because the contest involved the necessity of incorporating. And because we have ongoing IRB, that those are review board protocols that are being used in actual patient procedures, once we incorporate, then there is a notion of a kind of vested interest, conflict of interest, which is very difficult to try to resolve without prohibiting people from participating in those actual studies. So we're in a funny situation right now where students want to actually incorporate, but if they do, it's going to hurt ongoing experiments. And since at the moment, at least, the things that they're doing aren't quite ready to actually really be sold to people, I think it's probably the best decision that they made right now, not to go the route of the full incorporation, but to wait until we get back additional good results from the studies that we're currently doing. Let's see. So, in addition to things like that that actually are taking place in my lab, I can mention that the way things work at Columbia, if a student takes a course, and it's, let's say, a project course, they work with me, and they're paying for the course, then during the course of that course, the things that they do not necessarily involve IP that Columbia could make any claim to ownership on. Once that stops, the students actually are actively using things in my lab, then Columbia wants a piece of the action potentially. So we're in a funny situation where I have, for example, some folks who work with me in courses have been very careful about not using any equipment, so that since it's only interactions with me, only talking with me, Columbia doesn't get to assert any rights over what they're doing. There are other students, including the Medical Augmented Reality Project, BAS-AR, in which we really are using stuff that's in the lab. And so we've already filed for IP protection, and those are filings that, because of the way in which Columbia works, any student, any faculty member who does these kinds of protocols and who works in the lab, basically is saying to Columbia that yes, they agree that Columbia has right of first refusal for any IP to actually develop their own project. And that means that right now we have some active filings, and Columbia will, as they progress through the patenting process, continue to make decisions about whether they want to take the next step or not. If they decide not to take the next step, then we're given the right to be able to go and take them over. I've actually had one situation where work done by a student a number of years ago, which Columbia then filed a provisional for. The U.S. patent refers to a very easy to get kind of patent application that needs to be followed if you really want to be serious about it a year later by a regular, normal utility patent application. And so Columbia filed the provisional, filed the regular application, went through some of the process of interacting with the examiner, and then decided, you know what, they didn't really want to continue. And so they did something that I think is fair and reasonable, which is they gave us the right to be able to go and take it over. And the way that it works in this situation and in others, we had, in fact, my student decided to actually pay out of his own pocket to complete the process, and actually, luckily, the patent ended up being awarded. And the relationship we have with Columbia basically is one in which we have guaranteed to Columbia, if we actually make any money with it, then the first use of that money is to pay back the lawyers who actually led the process up until we got it back from Columbia, which is very fair and reasonable. It would have been equivalent to what we would have paid ourselves. Let's see. So at this point, we have one thing which very well will end up we hope, actually turning into something that will be a real company, but isn't right now because wisely the decision has been made to garner enough good feedback from physicians using the system who are also participating in the creation of the system in terms of being users who tell us what modifications they want in the user interface. So we have one thing ongoing. We have other things that are actually not owned by Columbia, which came out of my lab. And in one other case right now, I have a former student who in fact was part of that first project, and who now has a spin-off on his own, which Columbia has no say over because it was work that was independent of the stuff that he did as a student, which is an augmented reality content distribution and management network to make it easy for people to want to have AR ads, for example, to be able to go and have his system take care of making sure that the content is accessible and available to people who are using AR applications wirelessly. So that is pretty much what I have to say. Any questions? I'm willing to answer.
Like, how do you decide? Maybe you have some cases where you launch a tool that is open source, then how do you decide which way to go?
Yes, so we actually do. Columbia is very nice in the sense that although they have the right of first refusal for things that I do, I can say, you know what, I want to open source this. Now, alternatively, Columbia relies on the folks who are doing the inventing to report they actually have intellectual property. So in theory, I could think to myself, gee, this is really neat stuff, but you know what? I don't want to patent it. I don't want to tell Columbia about it. I can do that. I'm supposed to not do that, but if I reported, invention is a very broad term. If I reported literally everything he did that was invention, I would be doing nothing but spending my time filing invention. Just allow them to really not be particularly useful, because there's no standard of how important invention has to be. So I have had two conversations. One time, it's an interesting time, this company comes to us with a situation like what IBM ago. They say, we want to give you money, and we will give it to you in a way in which you tell us, guarantee us that any inventions that come out of this are going to be open source. Now, agreement, because there has to be, it's not strictly doing it together, had to go through part of Columbia that basically, if something really good comes out of this, you're not going to have any ownership of it. It's going to be open source. So I had the right to be able to turn around to IBM and say, sorry, I don't want to. I could have said, no, open source, don't want money. They would not have. And we needed to go with that. Columbia could, in theory, be to do that. In practice, if they ever did that, that would be so chilling that you would not back around. The Columbia realizes they would never do that. They can try to convince and say, hey, what about that? Think about the money that's going to be left on the table, and that's their right to say that to me. They just can't really exert any pressure other than using words to try to convince people how valuable the things we do might be, and it is another. I've had other situations. For example, recently, the thing we mentioned, that I mentioned during the talk I gave, the Mercury messaging framework, that is open source, and that was open source because the folks working on it, one former student, one current staff member, they put an incredible amount of time into it, decided early on they really did not want this thing to end up being something that Columbia owned and they had for people. They really wanted to make it open source. They convinced me that that was what they wanted to do, and consequently, I went to Columbia and said, look, we have an invention. We're going to open source it. I think it's really cool stuff. And yes, in theory, I guess you could go and decide to go and sell it to people. And unlike a lot of things that folks do, in which the source code that gets generated is a colleague in the industry once described the difference between code and software. Code is things that students write, for example, for a degree, and software is stuff that has to have the documentation, and it gets written with a greater level of care and more likely to be something which you can actually get people to rather than slices of the ideas. And we put a lot of effort into Mercury, and we think it's pretty nice. Something that really could have been something that we would license in an open source way. But from my standpoint, I think it's a good thing to do, to be honest. NSF, which funded a lot of this work, really likes the idea of us making things open source. Even though anything that we do with NSF funding, Columbia actually gets it. That's just a standard. Any university doing things funded by the government gets to own that stuff. And the government gets the right to be able to use it free, but the institution gets to actually made the decision, and it was important to me for several reasons, including the fact that it was a good thing for us to do. NSF likes the idea that we would actually not just file for protection, but would instead make it open source. And the folks involved in doing it, who I care about, really wanted to do it, and I wanted to really make them happy because they'd be more productive that way. We get better work out of it. And so I made that decision. You all made that decision.
So can you speak a little bit about any of the patents, like when you went the other way? Can you speak about, have you guys received any royalties out of that?
Okay.
Has it been a good deal?
Yeah, that's interesting. So we have a number of patents that we have gotten. In fact, the very first one that I got was gotten at a time at which Columbia just really didn't do a very good job of dealing with things. And it was a patent that I think could have been turned around and monetized. It was for a particular way of visualizing multivariate data. And to make things particularly bad, what Columbia did, besides not trying to actually commercialize it, Columbia silently, that's to say without letting me know decided to stop paying maintenance on it.
Yeah.
And what that means is the patent basically
You gave
it's
up.
gone, right? And they never told me, right? Which I thought was just awful. That was a long time ago. Columbia's cleaned up its act since then. That left a rather sour taste in my mouth. We have other things that we have actually patented. And then part of the problem is that once you have a patent on something, well, people have to actually know about it. They have to be willing to go and license it. And that can be difficult in some cases. If it's a drug that might be able to go and cure some disease that people think is important enough, that's one thing. But if it's a patent that, for example, in one case, some of the work that we've done on what's called view management, trying to figure out ways of being able to make sure that the things would be appropriately visible when seen by someone wearing a head-room display as they move around in the environment, as the things move around that the virtual stuff is attached to. That is stuff that when we first applied for and received protection for it, really wasn't going to apply to a lot of things that people were doing out there. And it's changed since then. We now have talking about patents that are really close to the end of their lives. And the interesting thing is that there are companies that can take patents and by aggressive lawyering can monetize them. And there are folks who don't have those aggressive lawyers and who don't. So I'm a little bit disappointed that Columbia hasn't pushed as hard on some of the things we have got protection on. But my alternative is to have put lots of my time into doing that pushing. And to be honest, that's just not the way that I like to do things.
Spend your
I'm
time.
much more interested in doing research than in going out there and trying to monetize. Yes.
So, for example, about the deal with IBM, what do you think? So, what is it for IBM to get into this deal with you?
Why did they do that?
Yes.
Because they were interested in putting knowledge out into the world, and they had the sense that, you know what, if it gets put into the public domain, right, they can use it free and clear, right? In most cases, Columbia, if a company wants to go and have some rights to IP, they will often do most easily what the government does, which is to if I make an invention and we file for protection for it, and it's funded by the government, then the government gets to use it, not exclusively, and Columbia gets to own it. And that's the easiest thing we can do with a company, other than the government itself. Now, once that happens, since we own it, we can license it to other folks. So instead, a company could say they really want to have a lock on it. That gets a little bit more complicated because Columbia doesn't want to say, well, from the very beginning, you've got a lock on everything. They're more likely to say, well, we're willing to negotiate with you in a fair and reasonable way if something comes up, for you to be able to go and get that kind of sole ownership. And to be honest, for things like IBM, they're more interested in if they have the right to go and practice the patent or rather to practice the IP, that's fine. If anyone else wants to do it, they like to think that they, because of their size, are going to be able to go and maybe do a better job with it than other folks might. So the easiest thing for them is to not go through all the lawyering. Simply say, make it so that we can use it, and you know what, make it so that everybody else can use it too. So you're not sitting there trying to go and extract large amounts of money from specific other folks. Just put it out there. And I think that's my understanding of what's going through their heads. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not their lawyer, so I can't really tell you what's going on. And it sounds good as well.
And what do you think would happen with a smaller company? So I work in a small company and we have a hard time selling the idea of working with to the management.
I am about to cut a deal with a small company in which they have agreed to a very similar.
How do you think I can sell that idea to the management of my company?
I don't know. One way is maybe by selling the fact that if you're working together with folks in the university, it's not just the specific intellectual property, It's the ongoing relationship with those folks who, in fact, might even more than simply getting an idea that's been written down and turned into, let's say, the equivalent of a patent application. You actually get the people who came up with an idea to continue working with you and be able to both turn the idea into reality, which is in many cases not a trivial thing to do, and to continue working with you. And maybe based on the things they continue to do, you might be building on use of something which maybe is already going to be done as open source. Maybe there's things that we want to do that would not be open source. Or again, there are people who monetize open source stuff by providing maintenance for us. So just because they've done something that's open source doesn't mean they can't do additional things that build on and make that thing better and more efficient. And maybe advise your company when you go and make things in a proprietary way better, efficient, because it may build on that open source stuff, but add in additional things that are things that your company has developed on its own with advice, let's say, for the academics, that really wouldn't stuff with you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Steven. Carolina, experience and suggestions.
Yes. Lots. I don't know. I started 5 companies in my career, and I was recruited to be the CEO of six startup. So I done a lot of things, obviously, with that. So out of all these companies, 3 succeed, were acquired by other companies, and 3 didn't make it. So for me, the first thing when I did these companies in the past, of course, the first step is to determine, not only if there is a market to the technology that the startup is commercializing, but if there is actually immediate customers. You can make immediate sales, because the small companies, even with investor capital, they really cannot survive very long with that. So, of course, the companies that survive are the companies that have customers. So one of our companies, it was a very small company, but we had a very, very large portfolio of customers. So, so that's what we were bought. They bought the customer, since they didn't buy the company. The other ones were successful because of the technology. They wanted to have access to some of the, not patents because they were software-based, but more of the skills, the expertise. So another company that was acquired, there was a condition that all the employees, except for me, I'm never for sale, all the employees of the company, except for me, they had to sign a 5-year contract with the acquired company because they wanted the expertise. I stayed on the advisory board of the bigger company also for a period of time with them. So we also have done, my team has done 3 very successful open source launches. We launched something called VR Juggler, which that was before Unity existed and many other things existed. It enabled many groups around the world to do fairly sophisticated virtual reality applications. And that one, same as Steve, the university will have an intellectual property claim on this. But at the time that we did it, this was 1999, the open source movement was still very new, and it was not clearly understood by the intellectual property departments in the universities. So after a series of meetings, I convinced the university lawyers that there was going to be a lot more benefits deploying this as open source than trying to commercialize it, because it was a fairly complex software architecture that it was going to consume a tremendous amount of capital just maintaining it and providing support and all that, and that probably will not really give a lot of margins for a company to make any profits. However, if we made it open source, capitalizing on my reputation being known around the world, and that it was a good quality piece of software, fairly robust and all that, it will give the opportunity to create a community, users, and because we were the originators of that software, it will give a lot of opportunities for us to be funded to do work using our own architecture. So the lawyers thought that was a good argument and they let us do that. And it actually paid off really, really well because as soon as we deployed VRJuggler, we immediately signed a contract with a company called John Deere that make tractors and heavy equipment. And that relationship that it was based on VRJuggler turned out to be about $1.5 million a year for 12 years, doing different kinds of advanced virtual reality applications to be embedded inside their product design cycle. So we were very successful financially, capitalizing on the open source. There was, at the peak of the use of VRJuggler, there was about 10,000 sites around the world using VRJuggler, which then it became very good for us because it was self-maintaining. There was a very large series of mailing lists and user groups that if somebody had a problem, immediately, literally within an hour, there would be 3 or 4 other groups around the world that will give a solution to that problem. Bugs were reported, and before we could get into figure out how to solve the bug, somebody else has submitted a solution for the bug. So between 1999 and I would say about 2008, 2009, so we have about 10 years of VRJuggler being very, very active, very, very used. And we had quite a number of contracts. The biggest one was John Deere because we ended up with almost $40 million at the end of our work with them. But we captured a smaller relationship with Procter & Gamble. We were doing about $500,000 US a year for many years with Procter & Gamble. We also capture military work through VRJuggler, and that also provide us fairly large contracts with them. We started with about $2 million, and the last one we got was about $11 million, so it was a really big contract. So VRJuggler was a very successful open source initiative for us that I don't think we could have done that if we would have gone commercial. Of course, it also increased our visibility and credibility. Another open source tool that it was actually deployed by the Fraunhofer Institute in Darmstadt, ITG, was OpenSG. But because of the originator of OpenSG, a couple of years after that became my husband.
Biggest deal there.
Yeah, then OpenSG was absorbed into my group as well. And that one also was very successful because a lot of the rendering software that the car companies use for the virtual reality simulators were using OpenSG on the back end. And then later on, Autodesk acquired also OpenSG. And today, actually, the high quality renderings that there's a product in Autodesk is called VRED. So VRED still uses OpenSG as the back engine rendering. So that also generated quite a number of projects, funded projects, because we had the expertise. So that was a sort of a good opportunity. Right now, we have 3 patents in Arkansas. And those are because they are hardware. So we actually developed displays and interaction systems. So that was more suitable for a patent. But even myself, before I even filed for a patent, I did a market analysis to see if there would be any interest on these systems if we were to patent them. And all I did is I just put a little probe on my LinkedIn network. And in 24 hours, I got over 300 responses asking me, how do I buy one? I'm like, okay, I guess we're going to patent this thing because people seem to be interested in that. So we did the provisional patent process, which is lasts about a year, and then a year and a half ago we submitted the definite patent, and recently we brought this system to an event in partnership with Dell, because they were considering maybe investing on this, and their goal was if we get 50 real askings about this technology, we will consider being a partial investor to help launch this product. Well, they got 600 inquiries in a 2-day trade show. So, because it's Thanksgiving in the United States and all that, we are in a little bit of a limbo, but I'm expecting that in the next few weeks, probably I'll have to have some conversations and see how we're going to do it. So I don't know what it's going to tell you. We package a lot of our research with the students that do the research, so we typically align our contracts with the academic cycles. So independently of whether or not we commercialize something, the team of students that works on an industry project, when the project is finished and delivered, that typically is their graduation timeframe. So many of them get hired by the company. So there is a pre-arranged IP share or an IP licensing at the time of signing the contract. So that makes it really easy, because then we work on a project and we work very comfortably, because we know there's not going to be any kind of fight at the end of the project. So projects that I know that might have some value and an industry is funding that, then we get the lawyers at the beginning, not at the end. And that makes it tech transfer very, very easy. And that typically comes on conditions such as maybe a phase 2 renewal from the company, agreements that give us other benefits like exclusive internships for our students, donations, things of that nature. So we do quite a lot of those things. But again, my drive is always been, markets, we can always make an argument. If there is an argument, there is a market, but for me, it's more who is ready to put money on the table to buy this thing. And if we have a significant number, that depending on what it is, can be as little as 7 or 8 people might want to buy this thing, or as much as a few hundred, then we decide whether or not we go commercial. I've been CEO, I've been CTO, I've been VP of Research, I've been VP of Business Development, I've been Chief Operating Officer, because some of you were talking about finances. So I've been pretty much in all the different roles in my career. So the other thing that I think is also important for people that want to do startups, one of our startups failed because out of the initial, we were 5 colleagues that launched the company. And when you are the people that launches that company, you cannot have any expectation to be the recipient of money from that company. So you have to be prepared to spend several years with probably no salary or little salary, because you gotta pay the real employees, the real ones that do the production, not the executives. Unfortunately, one of my companies, we were 5 people that launched it. All of us were sort of the executives, and everybody wanted to draw an executive salary. So of course, the investors' money was burned in less than a year without no production. So, and I saw that coming, and I was very upset about it, and I have a zillion fights. Honestly, never do business with friends, because you always lose your friends. So I lost my friends. They were very good friends. We were very good friends for some years. And because of this, our friendship disappeared. And literally right now, if we run across in any conference, I'm just happy I just walk around, but you can see the knives and the today, unfortunately. But I just couldn't get through them, all of them. If we're gonna do this, arrange your finances so you can survive at least a year or a year and a half without drawing real money. And we got our first customer. We got $35,000 from that customer, and they took it all for themselves. And I'm like, guys, we gotta buy additional equipment. We need to hire this kind of person. So, you know, $75,000 is gonna keep us going 6 more months, but if you guys put on your pockets, we're not gonna be able to do anything. So even though we did in the first year probably about $500,000 worth of real business, not a single dollar was put back into the company. So it reached a point, and I was the only technical person, by the way. All the other ones, it's marketing people, business people, accounting people, that kind of stuff. So I was the one, because there was no employees, we couldn't hire anybody. And I'm like, as you know, I have my other life too that is academic, so I cannot be, you know, doing this project all night long and on the weekends, because as we get more projects, there has to be somebody else that's going to have to do that. So another issue that I have dealt with these companies, and it's also something that is often overlooked, has been with the board of directors or the advisory boards. When you create a company, there is an expectation of having a board immediately, right away. Boards can be very detrimental to startups, because if they don't understand the process of a startup, they can force you to make decisions as a CEO that you know are bad, and you try to explain this to the members of your board and they don't get it. So if you get members on your board, first of all, very, very, very important, make sure those members of your board in their normal daytime job, they have a job that is equivalent to your expectations for them. So if you're a CEO, make sure those people are CEOs in some other companies, or at least they have a very high level of seniority. Because I ended up in a company where the investors built this advisory board that every member in the advisory board was hierarchically way low on the chain of command in their daytime jobs. So of course they didn't understand the strategic decisions, you know, because you cannot have somebody that, for example, in the US is making $40,000, $50,000 a year, making a decision to hire somebody that is going to make $120,000, because they don't understand why you are offering such a big salary to that person. Well, I only make $50,000. We are not going to use this company and start giving $100,000 salary. Well, yes, we do, because otherwise I will not have the team of people that can get this product through. So that was another reason why this particular company failed, is because my hands, even though I was the CEO, my board had my hands tied all the time. Anytime I tried to make a strategic decision, their professional background did not allow them to understand those kinds of strategic decisions. So they were constantly shutting down my decisions. So that was another reason. I mean, that particular one failed because I literally walked out. I had a board meeting where I just reached my limits. I was, you know, you don't need somebody like me to run this company. You need somebody like you. So problem solved. Here is my resignation. Good luck to all of you, because, you know, I present this business plan, gets rejected. This business plan gets rejected. On the 7th business plan, I'm like, okay, you know, done. Because my first business plan, they let me do it. Another company did something very similar, and it skyrocketed in less than 6 months. I did another business plan that they didn't let me do it, and that cost us an immediate loss of about $2 million in less than a month, because we were not paying attention to this opportunity. So by the 7th business plan, it was just one afternoon, and I'll tell you honestly, I just got so fed up of spinning my wheels for months and months and months and months, and not being able to do anything, that I just got really upset. I probably should have done it more diplomatically and more professionally, but I was very fed up, and I just grabbed a piece of paper, my resignation here, go find somebody to run this thing, because I can't. I just really do this thing. So those are I guess lessons from the trenches on doing. Emotions are not part. Business is business. So even though you have a very good friend, and if you know deep in your heart that that friend is not going to pull the load, then bring it into the company because it will be a disaster. Make sure the members of your board are people that are in their normal day-to-day jobs, people that are making strategic decisions in their own positions out there. Make sure you have customers, obviously. Don't spend your investors' money on fancy office decorations and all that kind of stuff because realistically a customer doesn't get a fig about any of those things. If you give them results, they won't care if they're sitting on a pillow on the floor. So I don't know, what else can I say? Yep.
Carolina, can you speak a little bit about your time distribution? Like, how do you manage to stay on research, stay doing like high class research, and at the same time exploring all of these venues on entrepreneurship?
Well, on these six companies that I mentioned, some of them I maintained my academic position, and some others I took a leave of absence.
Okay.
When I was the CEO of this large company, I did take a 3-year leave of absence to run the company. So I was peripherally involved in the research center, but I was primarily focused on the company. In some others, I was doing both jobs. At the time, I was single, so that makes it a lot easier too. Because I could do all-nighters, I could do weekends, and there was nobody at home, kind of like, where have you been, kind of thing. So that made it at least a little easier. And on the last one that we did, I don't know, just I just have a home office that mirrors exactly my office in the university, and we pay a significant amount of internet fiber subscription. So our house has a fiber this big, so we can go in and out places very quickly, and mostly long nights, weekends. My husband takes my son to the movies, and I'm home working on something. Family comes for visiting Christmas, and they all go to see the Christmas lights, and I'm home working. So that's how you do it. You also need to have, of course, very, very good right hands.
Yep.
So you always have to have at least one, possibly 2 or 3 people that you really, really, really trust. That if you say, if you don't mind, can you take this tonight? Because I would like to see my son. And when you come in the morning, that person has taken that vote of confidence very seriously. And when you come in the morning, that person actually has to think down. You also don't have to be extremely picky because we're all individuals. I like things this way, but my right hand does things a little different, so I don't have to come in the morning and chop his head off because he didn't put a ping ball on the top, and instead of that, you don't put a hammer or something. You have to let go certain pieces, as long as when you deliver is good. That's exactly what you want. What else? Yeah.
Are you serial entrepreneurs? Are you serial entrepreneurs?
I am a serial entrepreneur. I was. Not anymore, but I was. I'm not a true academic in a sense because I like to do what I do in the academic research environments, but if I do it for too long, I get bored. And please take this as a positive thing. It's not a criticism to all of you in this room. I need change. If I keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over, I cannot be a deep scientist. I will never be able because I cannot work on this. I have to work on this, on this, on this, on this. And I think we heard yesterday and today also that sometimes, or many times, the university administration is extremely frustrating. So same thing. So sometimes I've been fighting maybe a couple of years to get something done, and it's just not happening, you know. So same thing, my level of frustration gets very high. So it's like, okay, time out. I'm taking a break from academics and I'm doing something else. Sometimes I'm staying in academics. For example, we were doing something very complicated. It had a lot of legalese involved in it, and we were spinning our wheels, and we couldn't do this thing. We had a really big grant from the National Science Foundation, and it was to develop wireless networks of sensors. And we were trying to do this thing because I had an opportunity to work with this company to serve as the test bed for this complex network of sensors that we were doing. And the company was being very, very generous. They were letting us come in and stick these sensors all over their products when they were not on the field and collect all this data on them. But the university, I don't know what, some administrators got into their heads that we were releasing IP without protection. And I'm like, we're not releasing anything because it's these little black boxes with cables. They're not going to see anything, but this is a tremendous opportunity to put this in physically outside. So it's going to get, our sensors are going to get heat, they're going to get wet, they're going to be cooled, they're going to rust, all these kind of things. There's going to be a long distance between the home base and where the sensors are. So anyway, so we were like almost a year spinning our wheels with this whole, whatever it was that the administration got into it. So I got really tired and I said, you know, I'm just taking a break. But as I was taking my break, in another life, I was a classical ballet dancer. So I had some intersection with a dance company. So I started working with them to just stage a performance, to decompress, just to get my mind clear. And as I was doing that, I was, you know, we can build suits for all these dancers with our sensors. And we can put the home base for the sensors backstage. So these end up in this theatrical production where we put these sensors on dancers. And of course, they get wet because the dancers sweat. They get pulled because the dancers stretch, you know. They go rusted. I mean, they jump away from the base because they're jumping around the theater. So we made this stage performance professionally done. Tickets to Ticketmasters, all that kind of stuff. The dancers were fantastic because we burned them, we cut them, you know, for 6 months. We have to refine, you know, the design of the sensors. We use heart rate measurements, pressure sensors on the feet, joint sensors, gyroscope to determine the dance. And then the backdrop was virtual reality. We paint the back of the stage with silver paint, and then we were projecting an interactive world that was changing based on the dance, and everybody in the theater has 3D glasses. So anyway, so that was like a 7-month process. There was no legalese because, of course, the lawyers was like, well, dance performance doesn't really matter. So it was great, you know. So we actually did that, and for me, it was like almost like a year break from administrative things. But then we were very successful. The NSF loved it. They absolutely loved it because we were doing a STEM, but we turned it into a STEAM with the A, the arts. And oh my gosh, everybody was so happy. We did the whole thing. And then we end up with a very robust design that ended up in a patent that then the university actually made quite a lot of money out of that patent. You know, so I'm not conventional. Once in a while, I take breaks and I do something. So, but now I'm settled. I gotta finally gotta be a little more. I have to be home once in a while.
Thank you very much. Bravo. Happily, you are not traditional people. We are very happy to have you. Okay. I am very critical with the students that talk with in this position. Okay, we arrived at the end of our 2-day meeting, and I will be taking my international bad English to say thank you very much to be here, and thank you very much to the Hans Hagen team leadership in this kind of relationship and this kind of actions. Of course, we work a lot, but we learn together. As I say yesterday, we did a lot of things together. And for example, this kind of workshop in the summer, in general in the summer time, and this 20 years international seminar, we learn to do together, mainly with the Kaiserslautern team, sponsored by the DAAD and our university, and the results are mainly you, the students, the alumni, the enterprises, our partnerships, this construction based on the trustness with the teams as Gratis in Lyon, the teams as Institut Image Chalon, for example, the Iowa team, Tim Oliver, that is not here. We build together the long-term relationships, and this style of conversation of this morning, in very sincere and
Relax.
simple way to say the true condition and the true things in order to build on the true basis the new models. I think this is the basis of this innovation behavior that is the DNA of our teams, and in particular of the Imagine teams. I would invite Hans to say some words to close our seminar.
So I want to make it short, and I just want to mention a couple of things. So how can you be successful? So we have different backgrounds in academia, and spin-offs, whatever. Well, I think there's one general rule. There must be a group of people who do more than they are supposed to do. So that's the way to be successful, and you thank everybody, but certainly not yourself. So it's my duty to thank you. It's a pleasure to work with you, and I'd like to keep going. And I'm convinced we find ways, we always did, to find new opportunities to get the funding and opportunities for young people. And personally, I promise you, next time I speak better Spanish.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a good year. And see you soon. And I invite you to keep contact and to keep together, to work and to act with the new things, in the very active with the Bucaramanga team and so on. Okay, thank you very much. I have not the music and not the, but life is hard, especially in the tropics. Thank you very much.